Evening. Thanks, Echo. um, yeah, welcome to spring. Yesterday was the equinox, the vernal equinox. And it brings me naturally, quite naturally, to thoughts about birth and death, or death and rebirth. So stepping out last night into the nighttime air, I was hit by that loamy smell of earth, and just this rich, loamy smell. I heard the aroma. It was like an explosion of sound, of symphony of sound, the scent of living soil leaping. And actually, it felt that way. It was like it just came up the way it leapt. The smell leapt to my nose. So that's the beauty of stepping out in the night. You get so accustomed to the inside the house atmosphere, and then you step out and it's just alive with scent and openness and freshness. And then walking through the park near my house, the scent of daphne, which is also blooming now, and the daphne in the back of the Zen Center is blooming quite lovely, quite scentily. And the early plums are covered with white blossoms or pink blossoms, depending on the variety. And the sound of the blossoms and the trickle of the spring in the nearby creek. There's just so much going on, and the birds are so active and interested, and so it's a huge revival happening. We're in the midst of a revival as blossom and scent and infinite spring activity fills. And maybe you've been stirred by that as well as the light returns. And even though tonight it's not where I am, it's pretty cloudy, it's pretty dark. But there's been a lot more light in general. So resurrection as a theme is really universal. As spring comes back, comes forth every year, all the children of God in the dark months return and are reformed. And so death and resurrection is a basic description of samsara, and a basic description of impermanence, death and resurrection, of interdependent arising, co-arising, and the passing away of all forms, including you and me, and the lotus unfolding perennially. All of this is always unfolding, being, and then passing away in its various forms. And, in the garden now, and many of you I know are gardeners, you go out to make room for I know the irises are all coming up. And so the old iris stuff, which is from last year, is just rotting away there. And so it's all there. The old is fertilizing the new, and the new is so fresh and it looks so promising. So we speak of death and resurrection as though they're separate. And in the human world, they seem separate. In the world of words and concepts, they're separate. In the world of the senses, they're separate. In the world of sensation, the sensations are separate. They seem that way. And in this separate seeming world, we walk around sometimes even as though we're dead, the walking dead, lost in memories and emotions, thoughts of future and past, and not part of the vital life that is emerging all around us. We die into our old grievances. We just fall back into the earth of our old grievances and thinking about what we're worried about, and awash in a constant, wordy, dissatisfied narrative. This is all part of what takes us up much of the time. And we forget, sometimes deeply, the co-arising that is dependent on the flow of each moment, of this moment, birth and death. As Wendell Berry writes about this, I think this is a really mysterious little poem, passage of a poem. The world lives in the death of speech and sings there. The world lives in the death of speech and sings there. These words really require a lot of space around them to take them in. They're surprising. I mean, when I read this, I was like, whoa, that's such a surprising set of words. The world lives in the death of speech and sings there. That's just a beautiful Zen expression, actually. In our narratives, our attention becomes distracted from the moment of life in its song, in the vibrancy of the song of the moment that's fresh and subtle, and always comes to us newly from point zero, spontaneously resurrecting. So this moment really is point zero. And we forget, I forget, maybe you forget, maybe you don't. In Sangha Jewel, we renew our practice together of moment to moment resurrection as one body, changing forms in an ocean of awareness. It's always going on. We're always in the ocean of awareness. Yesterday at the Zen Center in the garden, a number of you dug and trimmed and placed and smelled the earth and mud. And a lot of it got caught in shoes, shoe treads. And at home, some of you too are puttering in the garden these days, or noticing the leaves emerging on the stalks as you walk through the woods. Those tiny first clumps of leaves, they're so small. The light spray of wild plum blossoms against the dark sodden skin of the trees, and the muddy spots along the path. It's kind of the dharma of our life in the springtime. This life that we share with all of its mud. We share this mud with so many beings. I was working in the garden earlier this week, putting some rocks, placing rocks to support on the steeper parts where the dirt is falling away from the roots of the shrubs. So placing some rocks in there. And at one point, and sometimes I come across these holes into the mud, and I wonder, what is that? Well, out from one of these holes emerged an earthworm that was about this long and this wide. I mean, it was just this huge thing, and it answered a question I've had in the garden for a long time. It showed me what lives in those holes. And I was disturbing it. It was probably coming out I don't know about worms and the mentation of worms, but definitely where it was being disrupted. So we share this life with so many creatures, and this ground that we stand on. And the ground that we stand on, and we are always seeking at the same time. So in this practice, we're in the very place that we seek. It's kind of interesting that they both go together. We seek what is real, with nothing intervening. And perhaps this is what we could call God, the real with nothing intervening, seeking yet never separate from, though we may not be directly realizing it at any one moment. Longchenpa, the great 14th century Tibetan yogi says, doing nothing, we stay with the zing of reality. That could be a great description of Zazen. Doing nothing, we stay with the zing of reality. Well, often my mind drifts in clouds of planning and agitation, while all the while missing out on the bright, clear, direct awareness in this moment. And too often I may forget to stay with the zing of reality and forget the openness right here in constant spontaneity. This talk is not given in the spirit of a should. This is how you should experience. This is not the spirit of what I'm saying, but just as a reminder to all of us, as a reminder to myself, what it is like to just relax into the present moment and be here and have this be the complete whole ground zero. So one of the lovely treats that follows sesshin, and we are beginning sesshin tomorrow for the week, is when we, especially when we finish, but somewhere during sesshin, this emerges, how vividly we experience the moment, how freshly and open it feels just to walk or to prepare a meal. Anything, the immediacy and the zing of this open moment, to take off our socks before we go to bed. It's also incredibly fulfilling. We come back to the innocence of the moment, the innocence of experience that is part of childhood, this kind of direct, open-hearted mind. So we need each other for this. We need each other together in the Sangha jewel, and we keep each other aware and on track. To not forget to be open. And in formal practice on the cushion, we pay attention and look deeply, thoroughly. And we help each other to return to the cushion and also to the fact that we are always aware. Even though sometimes our awareness is kind of hidden. As soon as we remember that we're aware, we are aware. On the cushion, off the cushion, just seeing each other, we remember the practice. This is one of the ways that Sangha functions. We see each other and we remember practice. This is a little curtailed since we only see each other on this screen these days. Or in the garden. We run into each other in the garden. So, but without these moments of the resurrection of awareness, coming back again and again from the wandering of the thinking mind and the realm of the living dreams and the mud in our lives, without this moment-to-moment resurrection, we're really living in the dying part of dying and resurrection, which is also part of it. We leave behind. We're always dying from the relative perspective. Each moment is gone forever. And this is true from the very moment, the first moment that we're born. From the beginning, when we're little, We're given words to name the world. And we're so proud when we say our first words. And our parents are so proud. I thought of, as I was writing that sentence, I thought of a thing that I saw at the airport a few years back, waiting for one of my daughters to emerge from her flight. There was a couple near me with a baby in a backpack. A baby, I don't know, 16 months old, pretty young. And somebody walked by with a balloon, and the parents were arguing with each other. And the baby just looked, it pointed and said, balloon. It said the word. And it was just, the whole world was the balloon. It was just one of those moments that years later I'm telling you about, right? So we learn how to name the world. And it's part of our play. The native language of children is play. And after a while, we become fluent in whatever language the adults are speaking. And by the time we really get to be fluent, we've pretty much been forgetting all too much the original language, the original face of every moment that we so clearly see as young children. Before the words reduce it to a little blip in that portion of our mind that narrates and schemes. And there's nothing wrong with this, but it is something then that we can return to. That is a possibility for all of us. We can be fluent in our native language, and also fluent in the way the entire world speaks directly to us. And instead of having to name every experience and every object in the mind, all the nouns and all the verbs, all the grammar of our cultural thinking mind embroils us, increasing our roof brain chatter and endless ego projects, and a constant distraction that we mistake for the world. We substitute, to a certain extent, this narration for the actual. As Wendell Berry writes, the world lives in the death of speech and sings there. Adyashanti, one of the teacher of the non-dual, says, life and death, becoming and begoing are only words. In order to save your life, you must see that you die instantaneously, moment to moment, instant to instant. So I'll read that again. Life and death, becoming and begoing are only words. In order to save your life, you must see that you die instantaneously, moment to moment, instant to instant. I was really getting down to the nitty-gritty, right? Making a point. That's a good one to recognize. So this speaks about presence, moment by moment presence. Once I'm born, I'm on the long road to the last moment in my death. This is the relative perspective contained in a framework of opposites, the opposites of life and death. Opposites that are based in the actual changing nature of all forms, material and immaterial. Becoming and begoing is always to be found. I love that word, begoing. Becoming and begoing. But the Dharma has a different perspective, one that also is so. It's a key that throws open the treasury of the eternal present and points to the unchanging nature of awareness. So we practice with awareness. We're always aware. And then when you're not, you're not. There's the thinking mind, and then there's awareness. The jewel in the lotus. And they're not separate, they're always together. The Dharma jewel is the perfection of our true nature and immediately frees us from the anxiety that comes from all of the words and narratives, emerges from all of our narratives. When we recognize the narrowing in this moment that our narratives require, are made up of, we're freed from the tyranny of subtle habitual constructs, the constructs of self and life and death. And, you know, when we speak about free, we can meet the radiant green of springtime grasses and the sound of the bell. These are the images in Zen that are pointing to that which is free of all narrative and words, outside, direct, raw. So one more aspect of this before I finish. It's really easy to talk about jewels on a sparkling spring morning, but what about on all the days that are so dark in our life? Dark and cold and drizzly and miserable and endless. Not just the weather, but also our states of mind and body, and sickness and health, and employment and unemployment, and the press of too much to do. I mean, there's so many forms that are not spring fresh in our life and in our experience. So when the one of the koans is, and it's a koan that you're given kind of at the end of the koan curriculum, which is about 600 koans long. Every day is a good day. So when the mind is illuminated by the light of the jewel, every day is a good day. Every day is a miracle. That's one sensibility that emerges in this practice. But when it's not, when the mind is mired, when it's more our habit to complain and feel yucky because it's so dark, or we feel poorly, or the habit of complaint and dissatisfaction and misery are so well rehearsed. At those times, we have forgotten who we truly are and are suffering because we're identified with our thoughts and with our life narrative. What's not turning out the way we expected, not being who we thought we were, and caught up in a feeling of the lack of grace, or what we call in Buddhism, not feeling that we abide in the way, right? Ordinary life is nothing but coming and going. Nothing but coming and going. So coming back now to the constructs of death and resurrection, we can see them in all their glory. They're not found separate from each other. They're not outside our ordinary moments or our ordinary human realm. They are the mystery that fuels our Zen contemplation. And in light of these concepts, we ask, what is my life about? How can I use it? How can I best use it? And when will I die? How will it come about? Will it be gruesome? Will it be painful? Will I be at peace and blessed? Will I be sung out by the angels? I mean, these are perennial wonderings. But all the wise ones tell us to let go. Let go of these words and these concerns and enjoy the spontaneous moment of this day in whatever its contours happen to be. So I'll close with a short portion of a Neruda poem. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Leave it to the poets.